Welcome back. We're here with Adrian Ross Duncan and looking at his approach to chart interpretation. Um, Guide us through where you'd start, what you'd prioritize, and how you might articulate these placements, Adrian, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, first of all, when I start the consultation, what's really important for me is to say some things that are right at the beginning. So I'm going to focus on what I'm sure 100% is correct. The reason, and I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes in the beginning, just as a monologue, just saying these things. And the reason I do that is that I don't think it's it doesn't work so good if you sort of say to the client at the beginning, what would you like to talk about? Or, how are you today? What I find works is to kind of transport them into this incredible world of astrology real fast, so that they feel they've been seen, and their defenses come down in a way, so that they think maybe more than you do know, and so it's going to be a lot easier to talk about quite difficult stuff and help them along with that. So I'll actually start by having this is basically what I've got. I've got the birth chart, and I've got the birth chart on the left next to the consultation chart, and I've got the birth chart on the left next to the progressions, and below that I'll have the actual consultation chart and the actual progress chart. But I'd like to see, what I'm starting with basically is a knowledge of the birth chart and the horary chart side by side. So just so that you know that would be the way what I've been looking at, and so that's like my background for being able to start strongly in the beginning of the interpretation.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So would you like me to sort of enlarge on that now?
Please. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Right. So I use solar fire to do this, but I take a screen grab of solar fire, and then I add the aspects myself, because I just want to look at the really important things. I don't want to be looking at aspects to series and stuff like that, and I don't use the asteroids because I don't think I don't know enough about them. I might include Sirius and Chiron because sometimes that's really relevant for me, but I'm really a traditionalist. I look at the main issues, and then I'll draw the aspects in myself, like I've done here. But I also look at harmonics. So I look at the 5th and the 7th harmonic just to see if there's anything extraordinary in those, extraordinary conjunctions, because that could really, especially if it's an artist or some creative genius, I find that's really interesting, and also for my own education, you could say. So I've got the birth chart here, and what I've written so is the age of the person, because I think the age is like really crucial. If they were 29 or 30, Saturn return. Every age has got a sort of some kind of significance. 33. Well, 32 I often find is a very romantic year because of repeated cycles of Venus and Mars. So I'll look at the age. It's kind of, it's very important. Has the person got children yet? If not, 33 can be significant, etc. The next thing I'm really interested in is, have there been any progressions that where there's been a retrograde movement? So I've noted here that Venus in Scorpio has gone retrograde at the age of 22 by progression. These are really powerful influences and show turning points in life. And then I've also noted that Mercury is also going to go retrograde at 29 Scorpio at 40. So Venus and Mercury are never really going to, Mercury is going to, and Scorpio is going to dominate a lot in this chart. So that's like what I've done. And then I've got the transits for this year maybe last year, maybe next year, to see, you know, what's very significant there. So I feel as if I've got the, you know, the basic information at my fingertips in this one chart.
Okay, and in the black there, you've got Jupiter, Saturn, trine. Can you read it? Just read us through what that might mean for people.
Yeah, that seems like I meant the sun. Actually, that's a mistake. So Jupiter, Saturn is going to be trine the sun. Sorry, I probably would have noticed this at the time, but forget Venus. It's trine the sun because sun's at 0 Libra, and there's this amazing kind of conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 Aquarius in December. So, you know, that's going to be quite a positive influence for her there.
Right, and we can see Pluto conjunct Mars in 2000.
Yeah, right. So that's what happened last year. You could expect that she's recovering from some kind of heavy pressure. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. I kind of like exaltations and, you know, fall, and that I find that they really do express, you know, the experience of the person. So I'm sort of, I don't distinguish very much between horary rules and natal astrology. You know, so Mars is so strong here. It's you know, I'm not thinking that she's going to be totally troubled by the Pluto to Mars, especially because Mars is exalted sextile Jupiter in its own in Pisces. I kind of still using like the Jupiter for Pisces, you know, and Saturn for Aquarius. I look at the outer planets, but I'm still using kind of traditional rulers to a certain extent. So that's the kind of background. So then I look at the chart, and obviously what I start out saying is like the things that really hit me strong, and what hits strong is there's Uranus on the ascendant. So I'm going to describe what that might mean. You know, that this person is born into a very tense environment. That you know, there's an incredibly strong international kind of emphasis in the horoscope, that there's a tendency to dissociation in relationships, that sort of thing. I probably wouldn't put it like that, but that's what I'd be looking at. And as I say, I might be looking at both of these horoscopes at the same time, with the horary on the right and the birth chart on the left. So I want to hit 3 things that are really important. And to do this, I'll often see what planetary patterns are reflected in the consultation chart, which kind of reflect things in the birth chart. This is like, for sometimes you're going to see a consultation chart that exactly replicates stuff in the birth chart. Then you know it's going to be correct. You know, so one of the things I see here, for example, is that she's got Mercury sextile Uranus on the ascendant, and in the birth chart, in the horary chart, it's got Mercury trine Uranus. So I know that this person is a really inventive thinker, really smart, really clever, you know, because Mercury is in its own sign in the horary. You know, so that I definitely trying to emphasize the positive as much as possible. You know, not just concentrating on the difficult stuff, which is kind of obvious. You know, I don't want to make things heavy. Yeah.
I remember that a lecture that you gave many years ago, where you said if you really want to get somebody to connect with the positive, talk about their trines in the natal chart.
Yeah, absolutely. And sextiles, you know, but you can't just talk about them. Actually, that's so difficult. You can, if you sort of talk about them, you'll say, you for example, you say to this person with Mars sextile Jupiter, which is a fabulous aspect in this birth horoscope. You could say, well, you've got great executive ability, and you combine it with a, you know, tremendous mental, creative mental overview. It will mean nothing to them, you know. So what you have to do is, you know, and I wouldn't do this at the beginning because it's kind of difficult. You need to get them to engage in situations where this arises, you know. So you'd be more like saying, Right. So when you're discussing things with people, I'll be in the third house, uh, then I'd probably be asking questions. So when you're discussing things with people, do you find that you're very sensitive and open to what they say, but you manage to get control of the conversation and can persuade them of your own abilities, right? That might be the Mars Jupiter sextile. Then if they sort of say yeah, then I sort of say, so what kind of situation would that be? And then they describe a situation, and then I say, yeah. What I'd be trying to do is to expand their sensory experience of that. Then they get the feeling of just how incredibly intelligent and competent they are. They got to get a physical feeling, so you have to evoke the atmosphere of the situation. So that's how I deal with positive aspects.
And then in opening that up, that I'm assuming that becomes a tool that they recognize in order to deal with some of the stuff you may be talking about later.
Exactly. So once they've had that strong feeling, they realize, okay, I'm not so stupid, I'm pretty good. And then you can go into the heavy stuff. Now, the heavy stuff, which is what I wanted to go into, which every astrologer kind of gets fascinated by, is the difficult things. Was this Venus in Scorpio conjunction Pluto. And you see what I noticed with that was that Venus actually went retrograde. So until the age of 64, it goes retrograde after the age of 22 to 64, and it goes stationary direct on Pluto, and it's going to be on Pluto for 15 years, Venus stationary or retrograde and direct on Pluto for 15 years from the age of 55 to 70. Now, she's only 33 here, so I don't really bring that up yet, but there's still going to be a lot of problems with relationships, which of course turned out to be the main theme of this consultation. So let me just explain how the horary chart reflected so precisely her feelings. So this is like in August, and because of COVID, she had been isolated, in her own apartment. So that's the moon in Scorpio in the 12th. Now you could say, well, moon and fall in Scorpio in the 12th, that's like really difficult. But she said she liked being, separated from the people in her working environment. That's the moon Uranus opposition. Because she could just be herself and kind of just be all alone in her own world, which is the moon trine Venus trine Neptune. So she kind of went into this kind of cocoon at home during the COVID crisis. So that is this kind of moon in the 12th. But you'll see that the main troublemaker in this chart is Mars. Mars is just a troublemaker at the moment. It's in Aries, and it's square Saturn here, exactly right. So she comes at the exact Mars-Saturn square. So that this is a major theme for her. And Mars is also square Pluto. It's going to go back and square Pluto. So going back to the birth horoscope, you can see that Pluto's been transiting Mars. So you can say with certainty that the Pluto transit to Mars, although it was over theoretically, it actually is over in October 2020. It's not over for her yet. So that's because Mars is going to go retrograde square Pluto. So that the big trouble here is Mars in the 5th in Aries square Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, right? And she hasn't had any stable relationships for a long time. The reason is it goes deep. It goes into the Venus-Pluto conjunction in the 11th house. So I don't know how much time I got, but looking at Venus-Pluto in the 11th, the point is she was raised in Mostar in Bosnia, and she was the only one of 2 Muslim kids in the class. because the 11th house is often this friendships with school kids. It's often school kid experiences. And well, the kids sort of said, well, my dad is going to kill your dad. That's what they said, like, so the kids are sort of saying, okay, my dad's going to kill your dad, So this is how she experiences Venus and Scorpio. That's the trauma of Venus and Scorpio conjunction Pluto. And, it's it kind of, well, it's going to sit with her, for a long time. So that's one of the reasons she's having great difficulties making relationships. So what's happening is she's using dating apps, right? And she's every date she gets into is kind of complete failure, and it's because, well, we talked about the use of dating apps, and how she kind of abandoned the actual process of dating very quickly. We're using it and always got these bad people turning up, and of course with Mars in the 5th square Saturn, Pluto and Jupiter, and going retrograde soon, there's going to be no good results from dating. And I told her, like, this isn't the time to be doing dating. And she was very relieved. She sort of said, oh, great, because, it's killing me. I don't want to do it. Okay, I'm going to drop it for a while. So I suggested she dropped it until Mars left Aries, really, which will be around the end of the year. And you can also see, Venus is square Mars. Venus is going to square Mars in this. So the whole thing with relationships is so very difficult. And that is the kind of here and now experience of her love life, which is what enables you to sort of go back to the birth horoscope and, to examine in greater depth what kind of defense mechanisms or reactions she experiences when she gets involved in relationships. So that's like the combination. Can you see that of the horary and the birth chart?
And you see the consultation or horary chart obviously as a past, present, future movable feast, I imagine, with
yes, but generally just it doesn't really give me much. I get a half a year before and after, I feel, generally.
And do you do the general rules of the ascendant ruler being her, so she is Mars in?
Oh yeah, she's definitely the ascendant ruler, so she's Mars in Aries. She's actually not doing a very good job with this dating, because she's like probably very, very masculine and defensive. She'll be Mars in Aries. So the other people are forced to be Venus in Cancer, you could say.
Right. And so there are no orbs as such. There's just what's going to happen.
That's right. No real orbs. I consider Venus like square Mars because Mars not going anywhere. It's going to go stationary. So Venus will end up being square Mars. So it's just a question of time, so the orbs is like just translated into time, basically. So you could say Mars has been square Jupiter, so that was a while back. Then it went square Pluto, and now it's exactly square Saturn. So she's like completely frustrated.
So do you have, do you look at ephemeris time, or do you look at degrees?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, for this horary chart, I use ephemeris time, but to find out what's really happening, in the evolution of the person's life, for really kind of reliable information about both short, and especially medium and long-term developments, I'll be looking at the progressions, and then it's a slightly different story. I note here, for example, that the ascendant's actually coming on Mars. What does that mean? Progressed, is going to come on Mars. And I noticed that Venus retrograde is meeting the MC progress. What does this mean? I always find it incredibly difficult to interpret progressions, but they're very significant in terms of life-changing events.
What's the difficulty in interpreting it? Is it expecting how
I
the
don't know. You know, well, yeah. I only understand progressions when I start talking to the person. You know, I don't think. Well, sometimes I can guess. You know, but um, for example, in this case, the ascendants come on Mars. It's not arrived yet. The ascendants at 20 degrees in Capricorn progressed. Mars is 22, but you know that's really significant, isn't it? You know, it's a huge thing when the ascendant hits the planet. So I'm wondering what that's going to be. Is she going to buy property? You know, maybe Mars rules the fourth. Uh, you know, so if she starts saying, "Well, I'm saving up to buy property," then so yeah, you're going to get property in 2021. Uh, you know, if she says, "I met this guy," well, the horary chart would say this wouldn't work. But if the horary chart was more supportive, and she she was thinking of getting together or maybe having kids, you know, then I would think that maybe that was the Mars. Or if she was if she was applying for a great job, you know, maybe that would be the Mars. That's why I find it confusing. You know, I can't guess.
Yeah. You need the context, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you? Yes, I was going to ask about the if she was gung ho about dating, and would you change your tactic? Would you?
I wouldn't. Well, no. If she was gung ho, if she says, "Look, you know, there's no way I'm not going to date," I would be surprised. You know, and it wasn't like that. You know, she said, "Oh, thank God." You know, I don't. All right. You know, I advise her against dating right now. She just was relieved, absolutely relieved. I would say. You know, she was great. You know,
right. Sounds like too much like hard work. Yes. So if you met somebody where the chart says it's an uphill struggle, or really all the doors are being slammed in that person's face, and yet they're still determined to keep on going.
Yeah.
A lot of clients come in.
I'd have to be very, very diplomatic. Actually, I actually had a consultation yesterday with an English person who was a bit in that situation, and you know, you have to be careful. She was Venus, you know, and Mars was, but she was happily married. That's Mars. You know, the partner should have been Mars, and she was happily married, and the partner sounded like a great guy. But Mars was was somebody in this kind of eco warrior group who, you know, like it was a complicated movement he was the leader of, and he was killing her. You know, it was killing her. But she'd been in this group for like years and years, and she was Venus. You know, and she didn't know if she should leave the group or not. And I thought she should definitely leave the group because Mars Saturn is a very cruel combination in certain circumstances, and this guy sounded like very cruel, you know. And Venus is just running into this kind of, you know, in Cancer is kind of at this time yesterday. I think Venus was opposite Pluto, just passed. You know, you know, it's killing Venus. So you know, but she wasn't sure about that. So I would just say, you know, if you feel, you know, really exhausted, there's no harm in extricating yourself from this group, you know. So you know, I can't force people to do stuff, but you know, I can make suggestions.
Yeah, I think some people turn up wanting confirmation of what they've already decided, and if you don't agree with that, it can be an interesting dynamic in the session.
Yes, yeah, and that happens quite often. I think, but if you kind of got, you know, if you got their trust, you know, and if you've been right about a lot of things, and if they feel seen and met and stuff like that, then they're going to take what you say. You know, I don't know. You can do your best, but generally the horary chart will show you whether they'll give up or whether they'll continue. And I would be very surprised if under these circumstances, for example, if she continued to, well, she might continue to date. You know, she might go home and say, well, that was an interesting experience, but I'm still going to date. And then she'd have Mars square Saturn, Mars square Pluto, Mars square Jupiter again, because Mars goes retrograde. She'll probably do that. You know, I don't know. So I would then try and sort of build up, emphasize the positive, you know, after a difficult period in September, October, November, things will brighten up in December, so to speak.
Yes, I think it's very useful if somebody is determined to swim against the tide of what they need or what's going on, then to give them at least a date to look forward to, I think, or at least something.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, I sometimes I'm maybe a little bit heavy, you know, because I do say what I think is going to happen sometimes. And I regret that quite a lot. You know, when I do that, I regret I haven't been more clever, use more metaphoric language, you know, more empathy. You know, I always regret if I haven't been able to do that.
Okay, can you say a little bit more for those watching who haven't looked much at the consultation or the horary chart? Can you guide us through what means what, or what you would look at?
Yes, sure, with great pleasure. So this is the consultation chart. Sometimes I get people who come from Korea, South Korea, and that, you know, they don't even have a birth date. But then I just made the consultation chart. That'll be so powerful if you don't actually have their horoscope. And so you can rely on the consultation chart to be accurate. You know, much more so than transits and progressions, etc. Is so accurate. So the first thing I do when I look at the chart, this one, I would say, all right, it's a Scorpio rising. And Mars is in Aries, so she's a very powerful person. And what a charisma she had! You know, it's incredible charisma, incredible powerful, vibration. So I know she was powerful and forceful. So that's her, you know, that's Mars in Aries. But I also know that she's feeling crushed because Mars is square Saturn. So, you know, it's bordering on depression, you know, because Mars is stationary square Saturn, nearly stationary. That I would realize I mustn't, you know, she needs a really upbeat message to feel okay. The secondary thing in the horary chart is that, you know, the moon, and the moon always shows how the person's feeling. It's the mood of the person. And moon in Scorpio in the 12th is isolated, and it's like a little bit negative. But it's in this beautiful grand trine with Neptune and Venus. So this is a person with a lot of emotional resources and you know, a very loving person when allowed to be so. Very compassionate, but this kind of trine, Moon in Scorpio, trine Neptune, is very. It's sad, you know. Water sign trines are kind of close to tears. They're very, you know, they're sort of a pathos with people like that. So, you know, she'll be very private. Moon in Scorpio in the 12th, very difficult to get into the emotional line, but you know, you're going to reach it with empathy and some kind of metaphor, you know, pictures and metaphors of good. Something. So she asked me about her job. Her job would be described, or her colleagues, for example, her colleagues will be described by Venus. The sixth house ruler. It will be very accurate, and you know, the colleagues are going to be like, because Venus is in the 8th house opposite Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn. The colleagues are going to be, you know, she's going to be supportive of the colleagues because of the Venus Moon trine, but the colleagues are going to be depressed, probably the COVID stuff. You know, they're frustrated, etc., etc. The boss is going to be, if there's a boss of her department, it's going to be Mercury. The boss is going to be great because Mercury's in Virgo, and Mercury's trine Saturn, Uranus. So the boss is a genius, is very, very clever, and works closely with the sun, Mercury sun. So there's an incredibly good organization there. That's the Mercury sun trine Uranus. So anything you want to talk about is what's the home environment like? Jupiter, what's the family environment? Okay, Jupiter rules the fourth house. Jupiter's conjoined Pluto retrograde. The whole family story from Bosnia and the ethnic cleansing is Jupiter Pluto conjunction. It's intercepted in the second house, so it's like something she's boxed in and doesn't want to access, but it's there. In this intercepted Venus Jupiter Pluto shows an incredibly a huge chasm of love which has disappeared. Love has disappeared into some kind of abyss. You can read every single detail from the consultation chart, and even the minor stuff like I don't know if she has a child. If she doesn't, but if she did, that would be described by Mars, and that would be a difficult child because of Mars, Saturn, etc. So it's just a wonderful tool. You don't need to know any more astrology than your birth sign, your natal astrology. It's just like looking at transits, but transits on turbocharge. It's such a wonderful tool. And when I started using this in the late 80s, my consultations improved 70%, straight away. Without me being any cleverer. It just enabled me to answer people's questions.
Yes, it's what it does, I feel, is it breaks down any barriers at the beginning if you can describe really why they've come to see you as well.
That's so true. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. What's interesting in you describing it, you're talking, say, the fifth house would describe a child if she had one. So it would be Mars, and the ruler of the fifth is Mars in Aries, square Saturn, etc. Would you use that to describe the child as they are, or as they are right now? Because would you look at the natal for more of as they are?
Yeah, I think you can only conclude it as the child is right now. It might describe as the child is just generally. It's so incredible. I had this example the other day, which was like blew me away. The client had a Jupiter Pluto conjunction in the fifth house, and she came. The horary chart had a Jupiter Pluto conjunction in the fifth house. They just, 48 years or 52 years have gone by. It's a 13-year cycle, and the children both had a problem with ludomania. Jupiter Pluto in the fifth. But the client had also Jupiter Pluto in the fifth. She didn't have a problem with ludomania. So what was the connection between the mother and the children? It's so subtle what's going on. Something about her nature evoked in the children a ludomania kind of thing. I don't know. I couldn't get to the bottom of that one, but it's like. There's many layers in this consultation chart.
And it seems to speak on a very practical level, but also it can follow in a sort of Mercury, Neptune, storytelling, uncovering, intuitive way too.
Yeah. And, as I have a Mercury, Neptune thing, I get these associations, a lot of associations, which, sort of kind of an inspiration. It's wonderful when you get a feel for what's happening, and then, come with something that's accurate.
One final question. Now that we see a lot of people online Do you calculate it for where they are or for where you are?
Yeah, honestly, sorry. You have to calculate it for where they are.
Okay.
I know there's been some kind of, somebody did a survey online and people thought, it should be where you are. Well, I don't know, maybe, the universe adapts if you want to do it like that. But the people I work with for years and years, we got tons of examples of how it's clear that it's where you have to you make the horoscope. You can make it for where you are and then relocate it for the location of the other person. But basically it's exactly as the horoscope looks above their heads when you're doing the consultation. I don't know how people get the other idea. I mean, if you're living in a country like Italy or Chile or Great Britain, you could imagine that there's not a huge difference between, the horoscopes. If you're in Edinburgh or London, the MC-IC axis is going to be pretty much the same. But I've been all over the world, working in England with Danish clients, working in India with English clients, and all of it, and I wouldn't dream of doing it any other way than the client's location.
Fascinating. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Before we finish, is there anything else that you want to add or to tell us about your approach or things that you've learned along the way? Anything that springs to mind? Or
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, it's really a good idea to check the ephemeris to see if the Mercury, Venus, and Mars have moved retrograde by progression or direct. Those are really important turning points, and especially if they make an aspect when that happens, it totally affects a person's life. For example, Freud's Mercury was retrograde in the 8th house, sextile Pluto 3 times during his life. So the sort of very dominating influence, which is a secret. It's like a secret of their life in a way. That's the first thing, and the second thing is, please use the consultation charts. It makes life a lot easier.
I agree. I'm always recommending it. Can I ask, just from that first to the final 2 points, when a planet by progression goes retrograde or starts to move direct, is there a general theme that you can tell us that you've noticed, or is it very individual?
Well, it is very individual, but some things happen, like if Venus goes stationary direct, for example, it's almost like you're picking up a relationship. You've gone all the way back and you found it. It's like you're picking something up. So you're picking up a relationship. Or when Mercury goes back, and this goes stationary direct, you're getting an essential bit of information, or you've learned, you've finished a course, or something like that. When Mars goes stationary direct, you've picked up some pretty heavy karma. So it can be quite a kind of sometimes violent thing. You break a bone or anything, sort of. So that's like one way. And when they're going stationary retrograde, there's this general feeling that they've gone too far. It's like Mercury when it goes stationary retrograde. It's like been scouting out the territory, but now it's like got into vulnerable. You can't proceed any further. So you have to. You've got to stop where and you've got to look after your supply line, so to speak. This is the sense that you've gone too far, too fast. Like right now, Mars in Aries gone too far, too fast. Now it has to kind of take account of what Saturn, which is also strong, thinks. And Saturn doesn't think very well of Mars doing this. So, Mars has got to struggle. Yeah.
And just one last thing, it got me thinking, if a planet moves forward or backward and then returns by progression to its natal position, is there a general rule of thumb with that you found?
Yeah, that reminds me, actually, I think it was Solzhenitsyn who was maybe his Mercury returned to his original position after being retrograde, and he was exiled to these Siberian plains, and it was something he wrote about, a whole vista he'd never explored, and I think. So what happens when a planet gets back to a place where it went retrograde? It's like a completely new territory. All the old karma is finished. Now it's like fresh, something like that.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your insights, your knowledge, and how you do things as well. And again, for supporting crisis as well, the homeless.
Well, listen, Frank, I love what you're doing. I really, really do. And I also think it's wonderful that the idea of giving this proceeds to charity and that. So I wish, you've done something that I wish I could have done. It's great.
Well, you've been part of it, so I appreciate that. Thank you so much again.